I never thought a snowstorm in December would lead to me becoming the most hated person in my neighborhood. But here we are, standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning, staring at a bright orange citation stuck to my mailbox while snow continued to fall around me. The letter was from Patricia Morrison, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association in Beaverton, Oregon, and it informed me in no uncertain terms that I was being fined $250 for violating Section 4.7 of the HOA bylaws. My crime: snow-covered house numbers. I read the citation 3 times, convinced I was misunderstanding something, but no, there it was in black and white. According to Patricia, emergency services needed to be able to identify my home at all times, and the 3 inches of snow that had accumulated on my house numbers overnight constituted a serious safety violation. I looked up at my house. The numbers were mounted next to my front door, clearly visible from the street despite the light coating of snow. You could still make out that it was 2847. This was insane. My phone rang. It was my buddy Marcus from 2 streets over. "Did you get one too?" he asked before I could even say hello. "A citation for snow on my house numbers." "Yeah, just found it." She hit like 15 houses this morning. Posted about it in the HOA Facebook group at 6 a.m., talking about how she was out doing compliance checks during the storm to keep everyone safe. People are losing their minds. I pulled up the Facebook group on my phone, scrolling through the comments. Sure enough, Patricia had posted a lengthy message about her dedication to neighborhood safety, complete with photos of various houses with snow-dusted address numbers. The comment section was split between people calling her ridiculous and a handful of supporters praising her vigilance. "This is nuts," I said. "It snowed overnight. Was I supposed to wake up every hour to brush off my house numbers? Apparently." "Listen, a bunch of us are talking about filing a complaint with the board. You in?" "Absolutely." I went inside, shaking snow off my jacket, and my golden retriever Bailey bounded up to greet me. I lived alone in this 3-bedroom house, having bought it 2 years ago after my divorce from Amanda. The house was my fresh start, my sanctuary. The HOA had seemed reasonable at first, with its rules about lawn maintenance and exterior paint colors. But Patricia Morrison had been elected president 6 months ago, and things had gone downhill fast. I made coffee and started researching HOA laws in Oregon. The bylaws technically did state that house numbers needed to be visible at all times, but there was nothing about weather conditions or acts of nature. The snow had fallen overnight. It was an unavoidable situation. Surely a reasonable person would understand that. But as I would learn, Patricia Morrison was not a reasonable person. I spent my lunch break drafting an appeal letter. I worked from home as a software developer, so I could manage my time flexibly. In the letter, I explained that the snow had fallen overnight, that the numbers were still partially visible, and that I had cleared them as soon as I discovered the citation. I attached photos showing the numbers were now completely clear. I kept my tone professional and polite, even though I wanted to write something very different. That afternoon, I drove to the HOA management office to submit my appeal in person. The office was in a small strip mall about 3 miles from my house. Inside, a tired-looking woman named Sandra sat behind a desk covered in paperwork. "Let me guess," she said when I walked in. "House number citation. That obvious. You are the 8th person today. Look, I'm just the administrator. I process the paperwork. But between you and me, this is getting out of hand." She lowered her voice. "Patricia comes in here every morning with a stack of violations. Last week she cited someone because their doormat was burgundy instead of brown. Burgundy. Can she do that? If it is in the bylaws, technically yes. Your HOA agreement gives the board pretty broad authority to interpret and enforce the rules, but it has to be reasonable enforcement. That is where you might have grounds to fight this. She accepted my appeal and gave me a receipt. The board meets next Thursday at 7 p.m. You can present your case then. Fair warning, though, Patricia runs those meetings like a dictator. Bring evidence, stay calm, and do not let her rattle you. I thanked her and left, feeling slightly more hopeful. Surely once I explained the situation to the full board, they would see how absurd this was. The next few days passed normally. The snow melted, then came back, then melted again. Every morning I made a point of going outside first thing to clear my house numbers, even if there was just a dusting of snow. I was not giving Patricia any more ammunition. Thursday evening arrived, and I drove to the community center where the HOA meetings were held. The parking lot was packed. Apparently, everyone who had gotten cited wanted to contest their fines. I recognized Marcus's truck and parked next to it. Inside, the meeting room was set up with a long table at the front where the 5 board members sat. Patricia was in the center, a woman in her mid-50s with short blonde hair styled in what I could only describe as the classic Karen cut. She wore a cream-colored blazer and had a stack of folders in front of her. To her right was Tom Chen, the treasurer, a mild-mannered accountant who always looked uncomfortable. To her left was Brenda Hayes, the secretary, who seemed to agree with everything Patricia said. The other 2 board members were Frank Rodriguez and Janet Kim, and I did not know much about them yet. About 40 people filled the chairs facing the board. The energy in the room was tense. Patricia called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. We went through the standard agenda items, approving the previous meeting's minutes and reviewing the budget. Then we got to new business. I want to address the recent citations that were issued for house number visibility violations, Patricia began. I understand some of you are upset, but I want to be very clear about why this rule exists and why it must be enforced without exception. She clicked a button on her laptop, and a presentation appeared on the screen behind her. It showed news articles about emergencies where first responders had been delayed because they could not find the right house. Every second counts in an emergency, Patricia continued. If a fire truck or ambulance cannot locate your home quickly, lives are at risk. The board has a responsibility to ensure the safety of this community, and that means enforcing visibility standards for house numbers. Weather is not an excuse. If you know snow is in the forecast, you need to take preventative measures. A man in the back raised his hand. What preventative measures? The snow fell overnight. Were we supposed to stay up all night? You could shovel your walkway early in the morning. You could install heating elements. You could mount your numbers under an overhang where snow would not accumulate. There are solutions. Those cost money, someone else called out. You are asking us to spend hundreds of dollars to solve a problem that fixes itself when the snow melts after a few hours. I am asking you to comply with the bylaws you agreed to when you purchased your homes, Patricia said, her voice rising. This is not optional. The citations stand. I raised my hand. Patricia looked at me with thinly veiled annoyance. Yes, Mr. Brennan. Jacob Brennan, 2847 Willow Creek Drive. I submitted an appeal of my citation. The snow was cleared within an hour of the citation being issued. The numbers were still partially visible even with the snow. I do not believe this represents a genuine safety concern or a willful violation of the bylaws. The bylaws state that numbers must be visible at all times. At all times means exactly that. Your numbers were obscured by snow, therefore you were in violation. Your appeal is denied. Can we at least discuss adding a grace period for weather conditions? Something reasonable, like 4 hours after snow stops falling to clear the numbers. No. Next item on the agenda. The room erupted in protests. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Marcus stood up, his face red. This is insane. You are fining people for things completely out of their control. What is next? Citations for fog obscuring our houses. For it being dark at night. Mr. Foster, sit down or I will have you removed from this meeting. Under what authority? You are not the police. Security, Patricia called out, and to my shock, a uniformed security guard appeared from a side door. When had the HOA started hiring security for meetings? Marcus sat down, but the mood in the room had turned ugly. Several other people tried to argue their cases, but Patricia shut them all down. Every appeal was denied. The message was clear. She did not care about our arguments, and she had no intention of being reasonable. As the meeting wrapped up, Tom Chen, the treasurer, finally spoke up. Patricia, I have to say, I think we should reconsider some of these citations. The optics are not good, and I am concerned about potential legal challenges. The optics, Patricia repeated slowly, are that this board takes safety seriously. If people want to challenge the citations, they are welcome to do so through the proper channels, which means paying the fine first, then requesting arbitration as outlined in Section 12 of the bylaws. I looked at Marcus. Did you know about that? He shook his head. We both pulled out our phones and looked up Section 12. Sure enough, it stated that all fines had to be paid before any formal dispute process could begin. And arbitration required hiring an arbitrator at the homeowner's expense, which typically cost thousands of dollars. It was a rigged system. Patricia knew most people would just pay the $250 fine rather than spend thousands fighting it. We filed out of the meeting, a group of us gathering in the parking lot to vent our frustration. Someone suggested getting a lawyer to represent all of us as a group, splitting the cost. Someone else proposed starting a recall petition to remove Patricia from the board. But as we talked through the logistics, the reality set in. It was expensive, time-consuming, and there was no guarantee of success. The bylaws gave the board enormous power, and Patricia clearly knew how to use that power. I drove home feeling defeated. Bailey greeted me at the door, and I took her for a long walk through the neighborhood, thinking through my options. I could pay the fine and move on with my life. It was just $250. But it was not really about the money. It was about the principle. It was about Patricia's abuse of power and her complete lack of reasonableness. And then, as I walked past a house with an elaborate LED light display, an idea struck me. The next morning, I started researching heated signs. If Patricia wanted my house numbers visible no matter what, then I would make absolutely sure they were visible. I found a company in Portland that specialized in custom illuminated signage with built-in heating elements. They were typically used for businesses that needed their signs clear of snow and ice year-round. I called them and explained what I wanted. Can you make a residential address sign, about 3 feet by 2 feet, with heating elements to keep it clear of snow and built-in LED lighting? Sure, the sales rep said. We can do that. What kind of brightness are you looking for? Bright enough to be clearly visible from the street at all times, day or night, in any weather condition. We can definitely do that. We have options ranging from subtle backlighting to, well, basically spotlight level brightness. What is the brightest you can legally do for a residential property? There was a pause. Can I ask what this is for? I explained the situation. The sales rep started laughing. Okay, I love this. Let me talk to our designer. We can create something that meets every possible interpretation of visibility requirements while staying within local regulations. It will not be cheap, though. How much are we talking? Custom work like this, probably around $3,000. I winced. That was a lot of money to spend out of spite. But then I thought about Patricia's smug face as she denied all our appeals, about her abuse of power, about the principle of the thing. Let's do it, I said. Over the next week, I worked with the design team to create the perfect sign. It would be mounted on a post in my front yard, clearly visible from the street. The numbers would be 8 inches tall, backlit with LEDs that could be adjusted from soft white to daylight bright. The heating elements would keep the surface at a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit, more than enough to prevent any snow or ice accumulation. The whole thing would be weatherproof and rated for Oregon's climate. While I waited for the sign to be manufactured, I paid the $250 fine. I wanted a clean slate. Patricia sent me a confirmation email, and I could practically feel the smugness through the screen. But then, of course, it snowed again. This time I was ready. I set an alarm for 5 a.m. and went outside every 2 hours to clear my house numbers with a small brush I kept by the door. It was ridiculous, but I was not giving Patricia another citation to hold over my head. On one of my early morning number clearing sessions, I noticed I was not alone. Several of my neighbors were outside doing the same thing, brushing snow off their address numbers in the pre-dawn darkness. We exchanged tired waves. This was what Patricia had reduced us to. Marcus came over that afternoon. "Dude, I saw your Facebook post about the heated sign. That is hilarious." "How much is this costing you?" "More than I want to think about, but it will be worth it to see her face." "Is it even allowed under the HOA rules?" I checked thoroughly. There are regulations about sign size, placement, and lighting, but my design stays within all the parameters. She cannot say anything about it. She is going to try, though. Let her. I have made sure everything is completely by the book. The sign was ready 2 weeks later. The installation team showed up on a Saturday morning with the sign, post, and all the necessary electrical equipment. They were going to trench a line from my house to the post location for power, install a dedicated circuit, and mount the whole thing professionally. Several neighbors came out to watch. The sign was impressive. The post was black aluminum, sleek and modern. The sign itself had a dark gray background with chrome numbers that would be backlit. Even turned off, it looked professional and expensive. The installation took most of the day. They had to dig down below the frost line for the post foundation, run the electrical line, set up the control system, and mount the sign. By late afternoon, they were ready for the big reveal. The lead installer handed me a remote control. "This controls the brightness. This button turns it on and off, though we recommend leaving it on all the time for the heating element to work properly. This dial adjusts the brightness from level 1 to level 10. For normal use, level 3 or 4 is probably good. Level 10 is, well, you will see." He flipped the master switch on the control box, and the sign came to life. At level 3, it was pleasantly lit, the chrome numbers glowing against the dark background. It looked classy and elegant. You could easily read 2847 from the street. "Let me see level 10, I said. The installer turned the dial. The sign blazed to life like a small sun. The numbers were so bright they cast shadows in broad daylight. It was absolutely overkill, and I loved it. "That is probably too much for everyday use," the installer said diplomatically. "But if you ever need maximum visibility, there you go." I turned it back down to level 4, which seemed like a good middle ground, bright enough to be clearly visible at all times, but not so bright that it was obnoxious. The heating element was already working. I could feel warmth radiating from the surface when I put my hand near it. Marcus, who had been watching the whole installation, was grinning. Patricia is going to lose her mind. That is kind of the point. By Sunday morning, the HOA Facebook group was blowing up. Someone had posted a photo of my new sign with the caption, "Looks like someone took the visibility requirement seriously." The comments were a mix of people finding it hilarious, and a few Patricia supporters clutching their pearls about it being excessive. Patricia herself had not commented yet, but I knew it was coming. Monday morning, I was working at my computer when my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Patricia standing on my porch with a clipboard. I considered not answering but decided I wanted to see this. I opened the door. Bailey immediately tried to rush out to greet the visitor, and I had to hold her collar. "Mr. Brennan," Patricia said coldly, "we need to discuss your new sign." "Good morning, Patricia. What about it?" "It is excessive and not in keeping with the aesthetic standards of Willowbrook Estates." I checked the bylaws thoroughly. It meets all the size, placement, and lighting requirements. The design was approved by the Architectural Review Committee. This was technically true. I had submitted the plans 3 weeks ago, and since they did not respond within the mandatory 15-day review period, it was automatically approved per Section 8.4 of the bylaws. Patricia's jaw tightened. The ARC approval was a procedural oversight. The board can still require modifications if the installation does not maintain neighborhood harmony. Neighborhood harmony is pretty subjective. The sign ensures my house numbers are visible at all times, in any weather condition, which is exactly what you said was required for safety. Are you saying you do not actually care about safety? Do not twist my words. This sign is clearly a response to your citation, and it is unnecessarily provocative. It is a response to your stated requirements. You wanted house numbers visible at all times. These are visible at all times. In fact, they are probably visible from space at full brightness, though I keep them at a reasonable level for normal use. We will be discussing this at the next board meeting. You may be required to remove it. On what grounds? I have complied with every regulation. Unless you are saying the regulations are unreasonable. Patricia did not answer. She made a note on her clipboard and walked away. I posted about the interaction in the HOA Facebook group, carefully keeping my tone factual and neutral. I included copies of the bylaws I had cited and photos of my architectural review submission. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. People were tired of Patricia's overreach, and my sign had become a symbol of resistance. The next few days were quiet. My sign worked beautifully, staying clear of snow and ice even as the weather stayed cold. Several neighbors stopped by to compliment it and ask about the installation company. A few people were considering getting similar signs, though most balked at the price. Then I got a letter from the HOA attorney. My sign violated several provisions of the CC and Articus, including restrictions on illuminated signage, electrical installations, and modifications to the common area view shed. I was required to remove it within 30 days or face daily fines of $500. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each read. This was complete nonsense. My sign was not in the common area, it was in my yard. The illuminated signage restriction applied to commercial signs, not address markers. And the view shed provision was about not blocking neighbors' views, which my 2-foot by 3-foot sign certainly did not do. I called the phone number on the letterhead. A secretary answered and connected me to the attorney, a man named Richard Voss. "Mr. Voss, I just received your letter about my address sign, and I have serious concerns about the legal basis for these claims." "Mr. Brennan, I understand you are upset, but my client has legitimate concerns about your installation. Your client is misrepresenting the bylaws. The illuminated signage restriction specifically states it applies to commercial signage, which this is not. The view shed provision relates to structures over 6 feet tall or landscaping that block sight lines between properties, neither of which applies. And the sign is entirely within my property boundaries, not the common area. There was a pause. I am simply conveying my client's position. If you wish to contest this, you can request arbitration. After paying thousands of dollars in fines first, right? This is legal harassment, and we both know it. I would be careful about making accusations like that, Mr. Brennan. If you believe the HOA is acting improperly, you are welcome to seek your own legal counsel. He hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, shaking with anger. This had gone way beyond a simple dispute about house numbers. Patricia was using the HOA's legal resources to bully me into compliance. I called Sandra at the HOA office. Please tell me you know a good attorney who deals with HOA disputes. I cannot officially recommend anyone, but I can tell you that Allison Wright at Davidson and Associates has represented several homeowners in this community. Successfully. I found Allison Wright's number online and called immediately. Her assistant scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. Allison's office was in downtown Beaverton, in a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. I laid out the entire situation for her, from the original snow citation to the threatening letter from Richard Voss. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Okay, first the good news. They do not have a legal leg to stand on regarding your sign. You are absolutely correct about the bylaws. Voss is either ignorant or deliberately misrepresenting them to intimidate you. Can they fine me anyway? They can try, but you can fight it. Which brings me to the bad news. Fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. Even when you are clearly in the right, they have the advantage of using the HOA's money to fund legal battles while you are paying out of pocket. So, what are my options? You can remove the sign and avoid the fight. You can pay the fines and request arbitration, which you will probably win but costs thousands in arbitration fees. Or you can go on the offensive. I like option 3. What does that look like? We file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, selective enforcement, and breach of their fiduciary duty to the homeowners. We argue that Patricia Morrison is abusing her authority and using HOA resources for personal vendettas. And we request an injunction preventing them from fining you while the case proceeds. How much will that cost? My retainer is $5,000. Total cost depends on how far they want to take it, but probably between $10,000 and $20,000 if it goes to trial. I did some mental math. I had savings and my job paid well. I could afford it, though it would hurt. But this was about more than just my sign now. This was about stopping Patricia from turning the entire neighborhood into her personal fiefdom. Let's do it. Allison smiled. I was hoping you would say that. I have been waiting for someone to stand up to this HOA. I have heard stories about Patricia Morrison for months. Over the next week, Allison prepared the lawsuit. She requested records from the HOA, documenting every citation Patricia had issued in the past 6 months. The pattern was damning. Patricia had issued over 300 citations in half a year, compared to about 40 in the 6 months before she became president. And the violations were increasingly petty. Wrong color doormats, cars parked in driveways for more than 24 hours, decorative flags not on approved list. We also documented the snow citation fiasco. including the testimony of 15 homeowners who had been cited for the same thing. Allison was building a case that Patricia was engaging in systemic harassment of the community. The lawsuit was filed on a Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone was ringing off the hook. Neighbors who had heard about it wanted to know if they could join the lawsuit. Marcus offered to be a witness. Even Tom Chen, the treasurer, called me privately to say he was glad someone was finally standing up to Patricia. Thursday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Brennan, this is Janet Kim from the HOA board. I am calling personally, not in any official capacity. I wanted you to know that two of us on the board, myself and Frank Rodriguez, disagree strongly with how Patricia has been handling things. We have been trying to moderate her behavior from within, but she has the support of Brenda Hayes, which gives her the majority vote. I appreciate you telling me that. Why has not anyone tried to remove her? We have been gathering support for a recall petition, but it is slow going. A lot of people are afraid of retaliation. Your lawsuit might give people the courage they need to act." "That is not why I filed it, but if it helps, great. This has gotten way out of hand." "It has. And I want you to know that some of us are on your side. Not all of us are like Patricia." That call gave me hope. Maybe this could actually lead to real change in the HOA. The weekend brought an unexpected development. I was outside with Bailey when a news van pulled up. A reporter named Jennifer Santos from the local news station got out with a cameraman. "Mr. Brennan, I am with Channel 8 News. We heard about your situation with the HOA and thought it might make an interesting story. Would you be willing to talk to us?" I hesitated. This would definitely escalate things. But then again, maybe public pressure was exactly what was needed. Sure, why not? The interview lasted about 20 minutes. I explained the original citation, Patricia's refusal to be reasonable, the expensive sign I installed in response, and the legal threats that followed. Jennifer seemed genuinely interested, asking good questions about HOA overreach and homeowner rights. "Do you have the sign turned on now?" she asked. "It is always on, but at a low brightness level. I can turn it up if you want to see what it looks like at full power." "That would be great for the story." I pulled out the remote and cranked it up to level 10. The sign blazed to life, the chrome numbers glowing like they were carved from pure light. It was absolutely absurd in the middle of the day, and that was exactly the point. Jennifer laughed. "That is amazing. Can we get some footage of that?" The story aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. They titled it HOA Horror Story. Homeowner Fights Back Against Excessive Fines. It was a 3-minute piece that laid out the whole situation, including interviews with several of my neighbors who had also been cited. They even got a comment from Patricia, who looked extremely uncomfortable on camera as she defended the citations as necessary for community safety and property values. The story went viral. By the next morning, it had been picked up by several national news outlets and was trending on social media. People across the country were weighing in, mostly in support of me and against HOA overreach. My heated sign became a meme, with people photoshopping it into various contexts. The attention brought unexpected consequences. A local solar company reached out and offered to sponsor a solar-powered version of my sign in exchange for publicity. 3 different law firms specializing in HOA disputes contacted Allison offering pro bono assistance. And over 40 homeowners in Willowbrook Estates signed the recall petition to remove Patricia from the board. But Patricia did not back down. Instead, she doubled down. At an emergency board meeting, she pushed through a vote to assess a special assessment of $1,000 per household to fund the legal defense against my lawsuit. The vote was 3-2, with Brenda Hayes supporting her and Tom Chen abstaining in addition to Frank Rodriguez and Janet Kim voting against it. The special assessment notice went out to all homeowners, and it was the final straw for many people. The Facebook group exploded with angry posts. People who had been on the fence about the recall petition now signed it enthusiastically. Within 48 hours, the petition had well over the required signatures to trigger a recall election. Under the bylaws, once a valid recall petition was submitted, the election had to be held within 30 days. Patricia tried to delay it, claiming the signatures needed to be verified, but Allison filed a motion to compel the HOA to follow its own bylaws. The judge agreed, and the election was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Those 3 weeks were intense. Patricia campaigned hard, sending letters to all homeowners defending her record and warning that removing her would lead to declining property values and community decay. She held a town hall where she presented statistics about code violations and property maintenance, arguing that her strict enforcement had kept the neighborhood looking good. But the opposition was organized. Marcus created a website documenting Patricia's citations, showing the pattern of increasingly petty violations. Janet Kim wrote an open letter explaining why she felt Patricia's approach was damaging community cohesion. And several homeowners shared their personal stories of being harassed over trivial issues. The election was held on a Saturday at the community center. The turnout was massive, with over 70% of homeowners voting. The results were announced that evening. Patricia Morrison was removed from the board by a vote of 68% to 32%. Brenda Hayes was also recalled in a separate vote. The celebration in the Facebook group was immediate and enthusiastic. People posted photos of their now relaxed homes, no longer constantly worried about citations. Someone created a meme of my heated sign with the caption, "The sign that launched a revolution." With Patricia gone, the board moved quickly to course correct. Frank Rodriguez was elected as the new president, with Janet Kim as vice president. Their first action was to withdraw the lawsuit against me and issue an official apology. Their second action was to review and rescind over 200 of the citations Patricia had issued, including mine. Tom Chen, in his capacity as treasurer, revealed that Patricia had spent over $30,000 of HOA money on legal fees and enforcement actions in just 6 months, nearly depleting the reserve fund. There would need to be a special assessment, but a much smaller one, just to rebuild the reserves to legally required levels. The new board also formed a committee to review the bylaws and recommend changes to prevent future abuses of power. I was asked to serve on that committee, along with Marcus and several other homeowners. We spent 2 months carefully going through every provision, adding reasonable grace periods, clarifying vague language, and implementing checks on board authority. One of the key changes was requiring board approval for any citation over $100, and requiring photo evidence of violations to be provided to homeowners with the citation. We also added provisions allowing homeowners to appear before the board to contest citations before any fines were assessed, rather than having to pay first and dispute later. The changes were put to a community vote and passed by a wide margin. Willowbrook Estates had a new, more reasonable set of rules, and a board committed to enforcing them fairly. As for my heated sign, it became a neighborhood landmark. During the winter months, when snow fell, my numbers remained perfectly clear while others were obscured. Several neighbors did end up getting similar signs, though none quite as elaborate as mine. The local news did a follow-up story in March, checking in to see how things had changed. They filmed me adjusting my sign brightness for spring weather, and the story ended with a shot of families walking through the neighborhood, relaxed and happy, no longer worried about petty citations. Patricia Morrison disappeared from community life entirely after the recall. She stopped attending board meetings and stopped posting in the Facebook group. Her house went up for sale 3 months later, and a nice young couple with 2 kids moved in. They installed a simple lighted address sign, inspired by mine but more modest, and I helped them get it set up. Allison Wright ended up taking on several more HOA cases in the area, using my lawsuit as a precedent. She told me that HOA disputes were becoming a major part of her practice, and that my case had helped establish important legal principles about the limits of HOA authority in Oregon. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for what is right, even when it is expensive and stressful. It also taught me about community organizing and the power of people coming together against unjust authority. What started as a ridiculous citation for snow on my house numbers ended up transforming an entire neighborhood. One evening in late spring, I was sitting on my porch with Bailey, watching the sunset. Marcus walked over with a 6-pack of beer. "Remember when we thought getting a lawyer and forming a committee would be too much work?" he said, handing me a bottle. "And now look at us. Who would have thought a stupid citation would lead to all this? To stupid citations and heated signs," Marcus said, raising his bottle. "And to communities that stand up to tyrants," I added. We clinked bottles and sat in comfortable silence, watching as my sign automatically adjusted its brightness for the fading light. The heating element would not be needed again until next winter, but it was ready, always on, always visible. A car drove by slowly, and I noticed the driver pointing at my sign and saying something to their passenger. They were probably new to the neighborhood, hearing the story for the first time. It had become part of local lore at this point. The subdivision where a heated sign took down a tyrannical HOA president. The next morning, Sunday, I was enjoying coffee on my porch when Tom Chen walked up my driveway. After the recall, Tom had stayed on as treasurer, and he had been working hard to repair the HOA's finances and reputation. "Jacob, got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, what is up?" "I wanted to show you something." He pulled out his tablet and opened a spreadsheet. "These are the HOA's financials for the past month. Our legal fees are down 90%. Compliance costs are down. And community satisfaction, based on our recent survey, is at an all-time high. Turns out not harassing people constantly is good for business." "Who could have predicted that?" I said with a laugh. "I also wanted to thank you personally. I knew what Patricia was doing was wrong, but I did not have the courage to really stand against her. You did, and it cost you time and money and stress. The neighborhood is better because of it." "Thanks, Tom. Though honestly, I was just angry and stubborn. I did not set out to lead some kind of movement. The best leaders usually do not. They just do what is right and others follow." After Tom left, I spent the afternoon doing some work in my home office. Around 3 p.m., my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found a woman in her early 30s with auburn hair standing there with a clipboard. "Hi, I am Allison Warren," she said. "I am part of the new welcome committee the HOA formed. I wanted to introduce myself and give you some information about our upcoming community events." "Oh, I have lived here for 2 years. I am not new." "I know. We are visiting everyone, new and old. The board wants to rebuild community connections after the past year." She gestured to my sign. "You are the famous heated sign house. That is actually how I give directions now. Turn left at the heated sign." I laughed. "Happy to be of service. What kind of events are you planning?" "There is a community barbecue next month, a summer concert series in the park, and we are organizing a neighborhood watch that is actually about watching out for each other, not citing people for violations. That all sounds great. Count me in. Over the next few months, the neighborhood truly did transform. The summer barbecue was attended by over 100 people. The concert series became a weekly gathering spot. Kids played in the streets again without parents worrying about citations for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. The Facebook group became a place for sharing recipes and organizing playdates instead of arguing about rules. But not everything was perfectly smooth. In August, we had our first real test of the new system. A homeowner 2 streets over painted his house a bright purple color. Several neighbors complained, saying it was garish and hurt property values. Under the old system, Patricia would have immediately issued a citation and demanded the house be repainted. Under the new system, it was more complicated. The bylaws did have color restrictions, but they were vague. Purple was not on the approved list, but it also was not explicitly forbidden. Frank Rodriguez called a community meeting to discuss the issue. The homeowner, a man named David Park, explained that he had always wanted a purple house and thought the color was fun and cheerful. Several neighbors spoke about their concerns. Then we opened it up to solutions. Someone suggested that David paint just an accent wall purple, with the rest of the house a more neutral color. Someone else suggested forming a committee to review and update the color restrictions, making them more clear. A few people said they actually liked the purple and did not see what the big deal was. After 2 hours of discussion, David agreed to repaint 3 sides of the house a soft gray, keeping one wall purple as an accent and including some purple in his trim work. The neighbors who had complained said they could live with that compromise. A committee was formed to review color restrictions and recommend updates. It was not a perfect solution, but it was arrived at through dialogue and compromise rather than top-down enforcement. That felt like progress. In September, I got an unexpected call from a producer at a national morning show. They were doing a segment on HOA disputes and wanted to feature my story. They offered to fly me to New York for the interview. I consulted with Allison Wright, who thought it was a good opportunity to raise awareness about HOA issues on a national level. So I found myself on a plane to New York, sitting in a green room at a television studio, waiting to go on live national television. The interview itself was slightly surreal. The host asked me about the original citation, my heated sign, the lawsuit, and the eventual recall of Patricia Morrison. I tried to strike a balance between telling my story and making larger points about HOA reform and homeowner rights. What would you say to other people dealing with unreasonable HOAs? The host asked. Document everything. Know your bylaws better than the board does. Find allies in your community. And do not be afraid to stand up for what is right, even if it costs you. These are our homes. We should not have to live in fear of petty tyrants. The interview was only about 8 minutes, but it generated a huge response. Allison Wright's office was flooded with calls from homeowners across the country dealing with similar issues. She ended up connecting with attorneys in other states to create a network of HOA dispute specialists. My heated sign got more attention too. The manufacturer contacted me to say they had received over 300 inquiries about custom residential address signs since my story went national. They were considering creating a standard HOA compliance model based on my design. Through all of this, life in Willowbrook Estates continued to improve. Property values actually went up after Patricia left, contrary to her predictions. Turns out people valued living in a community with reasonable rules and friendly neighbors over living in a place with strict enforcement of petty regulations. In October, a journalist from a legal magazine contacted me for an interview about the broader implications of my case. She had been researching HOA law and felt my case represented an important shift in how courts might view HOA authority. "Your lawsuit established some important precedents," she explained. "The court's ruling that HOAs cannot use their legal resources to harass homeowners who challenge them, that enforcement must be reasonable even when bylaws are technically clear, and that homeowners have a right to compliance with procedural requirements. Other attorneys are citing your case now. I just wanted to keep my snow-covered house numbers from being a $250 fine," I said. "Right, but you ended up creating case law that could help thousands of homeowners. That is the power of one person deciding to fight back." The article was published in November and was picked up by several legal blogs. Allison sent me a copy with a note. "You are officially famous in HOA law circles. Congratulations, I think." As winter approached again, I tested my heated sign to make sure everything was working properly. The first snow of the season fell in late November, and my sign remained perfectly clear while snow accumulated everywhere else. Several neighbors had installed their own heated signs, and they all worked beautifully too. One morning after a particularly heavy snowfall, I was outside with Bailey when a mail truck pulled up. The mail carrier, an older man named George who had delivered in this neighborhood for 20 years, rolled down his window. "Your sign is the best thing that has happened to this route," he said. "I can actually read addresses now, even in bad weather, and the HOA stopped hassling people about where they put their mailboxes and decorations. You made my job easier." "Happy to help," I said. "You did more than help. You stood up to a bully. We need more people like you." As George drove away, I thought about the past year. It had been expensive, stressful, and time-consuming. I had spent over $15,000 on the sign, the lawyer, and associated costs. I had spent countless hours in meetings, on calls, and dealing with the situation. But I had also gained something valuable. I had learned that ordinary people can fight back against unjust systems and win. I had helped transform a community from a place of fear and pettiness into a place of cooperation and neighborliness. And I had made friends and connections with people I might never have gotten to know otherwise. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Emergency meeting tonight at Frank's house. HOA discussing snow removal protocols. Want to make sure we set reasonable standards before winter gets serious." I texted back, "I will be there, with donuts." That evening, about 15 people gathered in Frank Rodriguez's living room. The mood was relaxed and collaborative, nothing like the tense, adversarial meetings under Patricia's leadership. Frank started things off. "Thanks for coming, everyone. We want to get ahead of winter weather issues this year. Jacob's situation last year showed us what not to do. Let us talk about what we should do." We spent 2 hours hammering out reasonable snow policies. House numbers should be cleared within 4 hours after snow stops falling, unless there are extenuating circumstances. The HOA would provide small brushes for clearing address numbers to any homeowner who wanted one. During extreme weather events, all enforcement would be suspended until conditions improved. It was common sense policy, arrived at through discussion with the people who would be affected by it. Revolutionary, I thought with some amusement. In December, the neighborhood held a holiday party at the community center. The energy was completely different from the previous year. People were relaxed and happy. Kids ran around playing while adults chatted and enjoyed food. Someone had even made cookies decorated to look like my heated sign, which got a big laugh. Janet Kim pulled me aside at one point. I wanted you to know that 3 other HOAs in the area have reached out to our board asking how we turned things around. Your story inspired people to demand better from their HOAs. That is great. What are you telling them? That it starts with the right people in leadership positions, people who see their role as serving the community rather than controlling it. And that sometimes it takes one person willing to say enough is enough to catalyze change. As the party wound down, I stood by the window looking out at the neighborhood. Lights twinkled on houses. Families walked home together. My heated sign glowed steadily in the distance, a beacon visible from blocks away. Someone came up beside me. It was Allison Wright, the attorney who had represented me. "Admiring your handiwork," she asked. "Just thinking about how weird this all has been. A year ago I was standing in my driveway staring at a citation for snow on my house numbers, and now I am some kind of folk hero of HOA resistance. You earned it. You did something most people would not do. You fought back and you won. That matters. I just did not want to pay a stupid fine." "Sure, but you could have paid it and moved on. Instead, you stood on principle. That is rare." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the party scene behind us reflected in the window. "What is next for you?" Allison asked. "Any more battles to fight? God, I hope not." "I just want to live peacefully in my house with my dog and my ridiculously expensive heated sign." "Somehow I doubt the universe is done with you. People who stand up once tend to do it again." She was probably right, but for now I was content. The battle was over. The tyrant was gone. The community was healing. My house numbers would never be obscured by snow again. As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and longer days, life in Willowbrook Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA board met monthly, handling routine business without drama. Newsletters focused on community events rather than violations. The Facebook group was actually pleasant to read. I still used my heated sign, though obviously the heating element was not necessary in warm weather. The LED lighting was nice though, making my address visible at night. It had become part of my home's identity. Real estate agents showing houses in the neighborhood used it as a landmark. 2 blocks past the famous heated sign house, they would say. In May, I got an email from a documentary filmmaker. She was working on a project about HOA disputes in America and wanted to feature my story. After discussing it with Allison, I agreed. The filming took place over several days, including interviews with me, Marcus, several neighbors, Tom Chen, Janet Kim, Frank Rodriguez, and even Sandra from the HOA office. The filmmaker also wanted to interview Patricia Morrison, but she declined. She had moved to a condo in Portland that was not part of an HOA, according to the real estate records. The documentary premiered at a film festival in September and was later picked up by a streaming service. It was titled Neighborhood Wars: The Fight for Homeowner Rights, and featured several stories from around the country, with mine as the opening segment. The response was overwhelming. Articles were written about HOA reform. Several state legislatures introduced bills to regulate HOA power more strictly. A national homeowners' rights organization was formed, with Allison Wright serving on the board of directors, and in Willowbrook Estates, life went on peacefully. Kids played. Dogs barked. People painted their houses reasonable colors without fear of citations. Doormats came in whatever color people wanted. And every winter, when snow fell, my heated sign glowed clear and bright, a reminder that sometimes taking a stand against petty tyranny can change everything. One evening in November, exactly 2 years after the original citation, I was sitting on my porch when a young couple walked by with a toddler. They stopped to look at my sign. "Is this the house?" the woman asked her partner. The one from the documentary. Yeah, I think so. That is definitely the sign. Their toddler pointed at the glowing numbers. Pretty lights, I called out. Can I help you folks with something? They walked over, slightly embarrassed. Sorry, we did not mean to stare. We just watched the documentary about your HOA fight. It was really inspiring. We are actually about to buy a house in an HOA community, and your story made us read the bylaws really carefully first. That is smart. Know what you are getting into, and know that you have rights. HOAs have authority, but it is not unlimited. Did you ever think it would become such a big deal? The man asked. Absolutely not. I just did not want to pay an unjust fine. Everything else kind of snowballed from there. No pun intended, they laughed. The toddler kept pointing at the sign. Lights, lights. Do you want to see something cool? I asked the kid. I pulled out my phone and opened the app that controlled the sign. I turned the brightness up to level 10. The sign blazed to life, bright as a small sun even in the evening darkness. The toddler squealed with delight. The parents laughed. That is amazing, the woman said. That is what victory looks like, I said, turning it back down to a normal level. Bright, clear, and impossible to ignore. They thanked me and continued their walk. I sat back in my chair, Bailey settling at my feet. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Lights glowed in windows. A light breeze rustled the trees. 2 years ago, standing in my driveway with a citation for snow-covered house numbers, I never could have imagined how things would unfold. The expensive sign, the lawsuit, the recall election, the national attention, the documentary. It had been a wild ride. But here, in the quiet of an ordinary evening in an ordinary neighborhood, the true victory was clear. People were not afraid anymore. The community was stronger, and ridiculous citations for snow on house numbers were a thing of the past. My heated sign glowed steadily in the darkness, a monument to the simple truth that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to accept unreasonable authority. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, even when it costs you, even when people tell you to let it go, even when the easier path would be to just comply. Because when you do stand up, when you do fight back, you discover that you are not alone. Other people are waiting for someone to lead, someone to show them it is possible to resist. And together, you can change things. I looked at my heated sign one more time before going inside. It was just a sign, really. An absurdly expensive, over-engineered address marker. But it had become so much more than that. It was a symbol of resistance, a reminder that homeowners have rights, a beacon of hope for anyone stuck under the thumb of petty tyrants. And on cold winter nights when snow fell thick and fast, it would remain perfectly clear, heated elements humming, LED lights glowing, visible for blocks around. My house numbers would never be obscured again. The end.